Do your characters actually have character? Are you building your own character while building theirs? Let's find out. Journal in the description box. Welcome on back, everybody. My name is Jenna O'Malley. I am your soul writer, author of sci-fi, fantasy, of dashes of romance and nerdy references. Alongside the raw healing stories, my characters weave throughout time and space, help other soul bards and hardies and more jam out in their pace and their time and their stride. This is one of them. There are episodes where there is a journal in the description box below, so do make sure you get your downloads for it. If you want to pause the video, go do now. Otherwise, welcome back. We are going to go ahead and continue to cover our multidimensional character series and see what we can really do to get you ready for whatever kind of writing challenge you have coming, not just October, November, December of 2024, but some of us are already planning and drafting what we're publishing in 2025 because we have books under the bed to get taken care of, and we just like to plot ahead like that. Not just for ourselves, but for our characters. So today we're looking at what makes fiction so human in the regard of, again, what gives our character character? I'm talking about the second character being that thing in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and beyond that high schools, middle schools, elementary schools really tried to cultivate to have leaders, better sportsmanship, kinder students, and kind of a roundabout way of tackling issues with bullying and other icks that sometimes happen when you have, a couple hundred people in a confined space for 8 hours a day. We're really seeing what makes some of that stuff larger than life to kind of riff off of Backstreet Boys kind of not being back. But at the same time, this is why we do find some characters to be believable and others not so much by comparison. This is why the bad guy becomes the hero in movies like Despicable Me. Gru becomes a relatable dude. We all, as one of the opening songs says, have a bad day, right? And it's kind of how you deal with those bad days, and, do I just brush it out and turn the bad hair day into a ponytail as I normally do, because frizzy Irish curl is what it is, right? What do you do in your coping mechanisms to pivot? For characters, you can boil these down to a couple of key categories. We're going to look at the basis of them today and beyond in upcoming videos in the next few weeks before we move, right? And talk planning for 2025, speaking of that plotting. But your characters, are they authentic? Seriously, I told you to take a journal page and answer what makes them happy. What makes them mad? What don't they want? Speaking of the last video we had, what is the least thing they want to do? That's probably what they need, right? If you missed that video, go check it out. What makes them annoyed? What makes them tick is really what we're asking here, as in what will tick them off, for better, for worse, for excitement, for anger, ire, happiness, depending on whether or not you write romance, other things, right? What is authentically something that they can get vulnerable about? What's going to make them cry like a baby? There's a moment in book 3 where Ian breaks down in his grandmother-in-law's lap. Like, this is one of the first interactions he has with a grandmother figure since he was a child. And I'm not going to tell you why he bawls, but he's the king of all immortals. He has a lot on his shoulders. He bawls like a 4-year-old in Magdalera's lap. And what does she do? She is the stereotypical grandmother, brings his heavy shoulders to rest in the strength of her lap, and she just lets him bawl it out. Because A, that's what he needs, and therefore B, that helped him think through things a little bit more clearly, foresee his wife, her granddaughter Neftiri, right? So she saw the ripple effects of letting him have that moment with some dignity and support. she let him get hardcore vulnerable. And that is kind of a lesson Ian has to learn by book 3. In book 1, he is your stereotypical brawny Scot. Nothing bothers him. Yeah, right. Take his sister away and see what happens. The little boy in him comes out. Hard. He's that big brother. You know, 8-year-old him. Because, yeah, that's the age difference between him and Anna Karina, I think, is 6 to 8 years. So, and it's like 12 years between him and their youngest brother, Ronan. He is very close to Anna Karina because she made him be. She forced him to wrap himself around her finger. That's why when book 1 goes the way it does, Ian has to learn to deal with being vulnerable. Now, at the same time, make it a positive thing. What's their love language? Not just how they receive, but also definitely how they give. And is it the same? Because for some people, it's not. I love planning surprise parties for people. I love, and this is because my mom was a cook for a living. It's kind of in my blood. I have a nephew who's going to culinary school for a reason. It's in his blood. I have 2 other nephews who work in the food industry. It's in their blood. Thanks, Mom. Anyway, you know, one of my love languages I've realized here recently is cooking. I'm not the greatest eater, but I love learning how to cook all of a sudden, strangely. I didn't used to. I am not necessarily a food recipient love language. Like, let's get real. Every husband, every spouse knows that one snack to get when they mess up. You learn those little tricks, right? I would prefer sometimes to get flowers. I have my reason for that. I realized the first time I ever bought flowers from my brother George was for his funeral. The display on his coffin. No one made sure my brother had flowers. And then I realized that was the first time I ever bought flowers for him. When he had bought me flowers a couple of times. Just because. And therefore, that's a love language to me, is to receive those flowers. And I never knew that until I realized that gift opportunity didn't exist. So, ladies, buy the guys in your lives flowers once in a while too, okay? Vulnerability. You can tell why sibling relationships matter so much to me in my books. And as reviewers have said of them, the sibling bonds are almost more intimate than the romantic love bonds. Like, seriously. Ian will admit he is not in short supply with someone to cuddle with now that he's a vampire. Because all he has to go head over and do is just wrap an arm around one of his brothers and just start talking. And before you know it, they're sitting, leaning back to back on their phone, talking at each other. And before you know it, they're asleep leaning against each other. I had siblings that were that way. We would sit down, watch a movie, and before you know it, we're all sprawled all over each other sometimes, right? It's just part of who I am. Made that way into most of my characters who have a good sibling bond. Now you can also tell those of us whom have had a negative sibling bond because it makes it into a character. Hello, Braxis and Neftiri, right? So how do you get vulnerable amongst the interconnectedness? It's not just the romantic relationships that should be intimate in your books. Some of you have Speaking of Magdalena, some of you have that grandparent that you know you can run to for anything long before you can run to your parents. An auntie, I am that auntie, have been since the age of 4 because my brother George had his first kid in his 20s when I was 4 years old. So yeah, you learn these things. And then also, for God's sake, give your characters something to be nerdy about. I don't care if it's a sport. I don't care if it's an innocuous archaeological thing. I don't care if they're Nausicaa and trying to cultivate rare plants out of non-toxic materials. Thank you, Studio Ghibli, for that inspiration of a generation of girls who should be like her. Give them something. Give your characters something. Or a couple of things to be nerdy about. I am definitely nerdy about a couple of things. You're noticing the autographs. Yes, they're autographed by the voice actors. I've gotten birthday messages from Steve Bloom as many before. You can bet that there are times when I re-listen to that because I needs to, right? If you're wondering, Ezekiel. Anyway, that character didn't get absorbed into my fallen angels. No, not at all, not at all. And yet, find something else they're nerdy about. Believe it or not, it'll make sense when I tell you why. I'm a baseball nerd to a degree, or at least in a former part of my life I was. Why? I lived walking distance from Oriole Park at Camden Yards in downtown Baltimore on West Lombard Street. You could walk to the stadium from my house faster than you could drive because of the traffic during game days, okay? How do I know? My brothers had done it. We used to watch and listen to games and fireworks and stuff from that area of the harbor from our back porch and our roof. If there was a concert going on over that way, and if they were loud enough and the city was quiet enough, we could hear the concert. I heard New Kids on the Block so many times as a little girl. Anyway, I never paid for it. So give them a couple of things to be nerdy about. Yes, I'm nerdy about boy bands, and I'm kind of a guilty pleasure nerdy about it, okay? Just saying. It's good to dance to. And that becomes part of what Shrek would call their onion. If you have someone who's authentically, vulnerably, nerdishly human, I bet your readers are going to love them. Just focus on those 3 things at a start. Journal in the description box below to help you. If you want some one-on-one, I've got some coaching open. Can't wait to see you soon. Oh, soulbar.exe. Also still open for enrollment. Stuff in the description box below. Thank you for all you do, even if it's just like, comment, share, subscribe, or viewing or listening for however long. Thank you for all you do to support me so that I can not only support myself and my family, but also support other writers in sharing their healing stories from the soul. Because all of us are learning how to take care of ourselves. Because our voices have always been worth it. Always.